So we're continuing Tefilla, and the issue I want to take up today is actually I think it's probably the hardest thing to take up Tefilla, which is the next general thing we got to answer, and then we could get into specifics. The question is like this: what was Tefilla like based on Mikdash and prior? Based on Mikdash and before.
Pretty different.
Correct. Okay, she had korbanos. Okay. Now, how do we know that? Because we know that because Tefillah today seems to be based on korbanos. Okay.
Well, what is that based on? What is the korban based on? Is that what you're asking?
Close, but let's talk about during the times of Beis Hamikdash. So, what was Tefillah? Was there Tefillah?
There's a mitzvah to be mispalel.
Right. There was some idea of Tefillah. People were mispalel, but it wasn't formalized. It wasn't formal Tefillah. It wasn't like what we have today.
I mean, isn't that also
That's a separate issue. That's a question of your chai to mispalel. But what was Tefillah? They didn't have Shmones, right?
They had Tefillah.
The people were mispalel.
Like they say.
God, please help my crops this year.
To go, or they just do
But it wasn't like real shuls. I mean, they had an idea of it, but it wasn't formalized. They had Kriyas Torah.
Wasn't there these like groups of Levim in every city or whatever that did like have some kind of like mispalel thing?
But it wasn't.
Of when they often.
Yes, but it was not formalized for the tzibor. In other words, all you had people davening on their own, but you had korbanos, right?
What do they do though?
Who?
These people in every city who were designated to be people who mispalel of some kind, corresponding to the carbon being brought at that time.
I don't know. They would just say whatever. There was no formal text. They would say, listen, God, may we have a good year. Whatever. I don't know what exactly they said, but they said something, right? But what happens after korbanos are mivatel? So we have formalized tefillah for the Am, right? So the question is a very simple question. So, yeah.
What about?
I want to ask a more conceptual question, which is that what do korbanos have to do with tefillah? I mean, we take that as a given. Like tefillah replaced korbanos. But how would tefillah replace korbanos? Like, first of all, did the average person have daily contact with korbanos? No. The Kohanim did the korban tamid, etc. If you were over chait or nadav or things like that, you'd bring a korban, and then there's 3 times a year where you had to go up. But in general, it wasn't really part of your daily life. So you have like this system of korbanos that somehow is expressed in tefillah. But what are they really sharing in common? What's the underlying idea that korbanos share in common with tefillah? And don't just say hashkafa. There has to be something. It's got to be deeper than that. There's something that tefillah and korbanos share in common. But I'll make it worse. Because listen to this. I definitely recommend for those who are interested in the Musar Rishonim. This is Menorah Ma'or, the Rishon, and no, different guy. But a great sefer on very good Agadah he brings in. But he brings in 2 what seem to be, I won't say contradictory, but problematic midrashim. So first he has an unbelievable medrash. He says, and I think it's the first one on what I have on the sheet there. He says there were 4 things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed to Avram. All right, 4 things, right? Torah, okay, korbanos, interesting, not tefillah, korbanos, Gehenim, and Malchus. Yeah. But that's part of learning a medrash is what. The question is, obviously it can be literal. What does that mean? Like God said, hey, Avram, get over here. I'm going to show you 4 things. And what are these 4 things anyway? What does it mean? Oh, we'll get to it. Well, first let's understand what they are. So Torah, Korbanos, Gehenim, and Malchus. Okay? So Torah and Korbanos, I think we understand. Gehenim, no, not Gan Eden. Gehenim, not quite sure. Korbanos, Malchus, even more vague, what Malchus is referring to. Okay? Then the Medrash proves them. Korbanos, no, Malchuyos, kingdoms. Okay. Now, what's great about this medrash?
Korbanos is the ideal, right?
Oh, we don't know yet. Oh, I'll show you why. No, you'll see why it's not. So then the medrash says, this is great. The medrash says, so God says to him, Kol zman shemanecha misaskin b'shtayim nitzol mishtayim. So as long as Bnei Yisrael are involved in the first 2, meaning Torah and Korbanos, listen to the lashon. They're saved, nitzolan. They're saved from Gehenim and Malchus. Okay. Umalchios. Well, you're saved from both. Hold on. You're saved from both. Now here's the best part. Okay? The asid based on mikdash for korbanos batel. What's going to happen? Korbanos, right, are going to be the vatel. There will be no more korbanos. So God says to Avram, "Bamei ata rotzeh sheyedu banecha." How do you want Bnei Yisrael to go down? Migehenim or Malchus? big Gehenna or Malchus? Which way should Bnei Yisrael's downfall be? Should it be through two Gehenna or two Malchus? Which one should it be? Okay. So Baruch Hashem, I guess. What did Avram choose? Malchus. Okay. What's this medrash talking about? This is a strange medrash. All right. Obviously, the point I want to highlight is Karbanos, but we have to understand the medrash in whole. On the other hand, you have a different medrash that he cites later on. Some Gemara and Brachos. That one says, to address your point, Gedola Tefilla Yoser Mimasim Tovim Umikol Har Karbanos. So Tefillah is greater than all good deeds and Karbanos. So the medrash says, how do we know Tefillah is greater than good deeds? Right? Look in number 2.
Like Milas Kasadim or like Torah?
Look at the source number 2. Gdola Tefillah Yoser Maisim Tovim. She'en lecha Gadol Maisim Tovim. Well, no. Just as Maisim Tovim. We have to understand what that means. Yoser Moshe Rabbeinu. No one did more good deeds, right, than Moshe. Afa Pichain Lo Nana Ela B'Tefillah. But he was only, when was he answered? Through Tefillah, right? So, and then it proves it from a pasuk. And then you have at the end there it says V'Amar Rav Elazar Gdola Tefillah Yoser Mina Karbanos, right? And then it brings a proof as well. Right, so you see that on the one hand, what did God show Abraham? God showed Abraham Korbanos, which seemed to be the ideal. On the other hand, you see that the medrash says that Tefillah is greater than Korbanos. How do you reconcile the two? And how do we understand what's the relationship between Tefillah and Korbanos? All right, that's the critical question. How do they relate to each other? What's the underlying idea that ties the sacrifice of animals and my engaging in tefillah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? In order to answer this, the starting point is going to be is what do we have korbanos for to begin with? Because if you can develop what korbanos, the purpose of korbanos are for, then we can go ahead and try to apply that to tefillah, and then look for the commonality. So what do we have korbanos for? I know it's a big machlokes, but
Ramban.
right. Well, let's just take but I have a way of. There's a way I can bring both of them together. But yeah.
Do they argue?
The Mordeh Vuchim, he says the custom which was in those days general among all men, and the general now this is key. The general mode of worship in which the Israelites were brought up consisted in sacrificing animals in those temples which contained certain images to bow down to those images, etc., etc. And later on, what does he say? He says, but therefore, right, by this divine plan, which is to ensure that Bnei Yisrael did karbanos, it was effected that the traces of idolatry were blotted out, and the truly great principle of our faith, the existence and unity of God, was firmly established. So according to Rambam, what happened? Korbanos was a normal way of worship. God was not into cutting us off from normal behavior. He wanted to ensure that there was a continuity in how we worshipped. The only thing is, he instead of directing the sacrifice to idolatry, we directed it towards God. That's his nifty way of. I think it was Ramban. So it says the Amar ki sizbechu zevach shlamim. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. It says the Ramban.
What is it about why we do
Yeah, he says ki. Well, what the idea is ki acharei she'asar hazvicha b'chol avoda lelilim ula Elohei masecha. Okay, v'reikan kol havodos kulam l'shem hamyuchad. Okay, so he says. So what Kadosh Baruch Hu did is that after forbidding any worship of idolatry, okay, so he took everything had to be just for one thing, l'shem hamyuchad, okay, which means to God. Amar ki kasher tizbechu l'shem, okay, lo tizbechu lo el l'rinsonchem. That's a famous pasuk, right? V'chi tizbechu zevach todah l'Hashem l'rinsonchem, right? Which you want to say meaning who said it before? It's for you. Ariel, you said that, right? It's for you. Okay. So he says, Shetia avodaschem l'ratzon lefanav v'yirtza bachem ke'eved yisratze el adona ba'asoso kol asher yitzavenu. Okay, and then he says that Tom later on it says Shalot techshavu sheyeh b'avodah zara shum to'elas. You shouldn't think that that there's any benefits doing idolatry. V'lo sasu avodas Hashem anechbad al manasa kabel pras, and you shouldn't think that. You should again when you bring the korban, you shouldn't think that in worshiping God I should do it to get a prize. Elolasos ritzono, merely just to do His will, right? Ki ritzono hapashut hu aroyev mechayev. It's simply His will, simply the will, the God's will is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay, and he says the same thing also, like when you bring a shlamim and the bailam eat the shlamim, sheyishru machshavasam lios bekavana ritzuya the culture came bekachay kachim. So basically, the Ramban, it's a very vague Ramban because the Ramban's saying that like when you bring a korban, so you have to have like good ideas in mind. You know, avodas Hashem, ratzon Hashem, yichud Hashem, all the good ideas. But what's he really saying? I think so. So I want to posit the following, and I think this is how we can see how it works by tefillah as well. So what makes the mitzvah of avoda? And if you want to say the one word that korbanos and tefillah share in common, it's avoda. Because what's korbanos? Korbanos are called avoda, and what is tefillah called? Avoda shabbaleh. But there's not a coincidence they both share that same word avoda. So let's talk about avoda by korbanos. Okay. So what I want to say is that let's take the mitzvah of lulav. Okay. I always love to use the mitzvah of lulav. My favorite example. So where does the perfection emerge from lulav? How does lulav affect you?
Recognition of Hashem's power of nature.
That's the result of the mitzvah, right? But you need the lulav serves as the vehicle. In other words, the ma'isa mitzvah, the thing itself,
Yeah.
and in other words, the action you do and the thing itself are critical in producing the idea. Okay? You must have the thing. Like every mitzvah has that. Tzitzis, right? Urisim. You need the thing itself becomes that which brings about the correct idea. Okay? And I think you could say that by all mitzvahs.
What about Talmud Torah?
What about Talmud Torah? We need ideas. You need chachma, right? But that's a good question. I mean, Talmud Torah is not really a ma'isa mitzvah in the classic sense. There's no ma'isa by it. What's the ma'isa of Talmud Torah? Guy can think about Talmud Torah. You know what I mean? He can think about it. He can. There's no actual ma'isa. I'm talking about mitzvahs meaning ma'isa mitzvah, like hadachas tefillin. I want to say this. The Talmud Torah also doesn't have a tzura. It's not like any other mitzvah. Talmud Torah is unique because there's really no tzura to Talmud Torah. Guy can think about Talmud Torah. But korbanos have a tzura, just like they have a structure to it, just like any other mitzvah. So it could be like this. It could be that the idea about korbanos is that whereas every other mitzvah, the thing itself is what the object itself is what brings about the daya, the thinking into it. Korbanos aren't like that. I don't think there's an idea. It's not that the korban itself, like you study the korban, like the animal, let's say, and that's the vehicle. Korbanos simply put a person in a certain frame of mind. They're setting up. I think that's what the Rambam means that it was a normal worship of man. Meaning, there's nothing unique about the korban per se. It's bringing an animal to the Beis HaMikdash, right? But it's that when I'm bringing the animal to the Beis HaMikdash, it sets a certain stage for ideas that I'm supposed to be engaged in. In other words, it's a certain format. It's not like a lulav where the lulav is the vehicle for the perfection. Rather, the korban, there's nothing about the korban itself. It's that korbanos were set up in a way that just sets the stage for man to think about certain ideas. Yeah.
The structure.
I brings the korban chatas. What's the essence of the korban chatas? Right. So the chatas is the culmination of something that the person was engaged in prior to the chatas. The chatas he just brings as like the final step of kapara. All right. Or let's say like the ola. Like let's say olas re'iyah. You bring a re'iyah on shlosh regalim. So what are you bringing that for? So you obviously have an idea of God in mind, but there's when you bring the korban, it's like now the person can engage in a certain state that he didn't have before. Like it focuses you on a certain state.
So I'm asking, why do you have to have a different?
Oh, because each one goes to different ideas. Chatas hits a certain chatas about tshuva. Ola is about recognition of God.
Why have it as a different?
He specifically says that Bnei Yisrael brought korbanos and they're criticized. Why? Because even though they brought the korban, what were they thinking about? Other stuff, right? But you don't see, but it's not just there. There's other times where they're criticized like crazy for bringing korbanos but not having the right idea in mind. But what's the idea you're supposed to have when you bring the korban? It's not like a lulav, where the lulav itself, you study the lulav and you see the idea emerging from lulav or matzah. Right? The matzah is a reminder of Yitzias Mitzrayim. You don't have that by korban. Korban is an animal. Bring up before, and that's the point I want to bring up here, which is that when it comes to tefillah, why does korbanos set up as the paradigm of tefillah? Because when you're engaged in tefillah is not what's a ma'aseh tefillah, right? Shemona Esrei. Right, but it's not really a ma'aseh. In other words, it's a dibor, right? That's also not a ma'aseh. It's not a classic ma'aseh.
By following structure, tefillah, not ma'aseh.
It's not a classic ma'aseh like what do you call it? Like picking up a lulav, right? Where you have a physical object that you pick up. Tefillah is a state of existence. Tefillah is you enter into a certain state of mind, and that state of mind, that's the state of mind that, just like korbanos, it's a state of mind that now you're ready to engage in certain ideas. That's what tefillah does.